oh my God, this is so much. Like, this is like,
Hmm.
you know, and like, then you have a moment to actually create comedy because the driver who's already kind of afraid of her can be like, are you okay? Like it's just like, drive on, drive on. I'm having a bad night. Just stick with me, and he's like, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, she's like
I
tripping balls, but like moments of
right.
lucidity.
Lucidity. Puns.
Welcome to Certain POV's Another Pass podcast with Case and Sam, where we take another look at movies that we find fascinating but flawed. Let's see how we could have fixed them.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Another Pass podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Sam Alisea.
Hi.
Sam, how much of your brain have you unlocked?
1%, which is why I did not understand this movie. Clearly, you need to have unlocked a lot more to really, really get it.
Or arguably, if you have 2%, it's probably too much to truly appreciate this movie.
Yeah, maybe.
Because today we are talking about Lucy, the Scarlett Johansson, Luc Besson film from about a decade ago. And to have that conversation, we are joined by Renaldy Smith.
Hey, how you doing?
Renaldy, it is so great to get you on the podcast. You and I have been friends for a long ass time. It's been, like 15 years now since we first met? Although that said, it's probably been about 10 years since we saw each other regularly. So
Yeah. No, I think yeah, because I keep thinking that it's like 2000. So yes, it is 2025, and I believe we met around. No, it can't be 2010 because
that was when,
let's.
because we're ESPN buddies.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and
that closed down in
in 2010.
Was it 2010 or 20?
It was
Oh,
2010.
it doesn't matter. Yeah,
Yeah.
around that time. Yeah.
Yeah, so now it's more like 17 years. Jesus. Because I started there in 2008.
Yeah, and I started there 2007, I think, or six. It was a fun time. Definitely a fun time to be around a lot of good people and make a lot of money and watch sports. That was really the only reason I worked there, because I was like, I get to enjoy as much sports as I can. Great, awesome, sign me up.
Yeah, which makes it even crazier that I enjoyed working there as much as I did, because I am not a sports person at all.
I think I remember that. Yeah,
I never at any point looked at the screens aside from like, oh, that's a cool commercial.
Yeah. There's so many. I think I remember it's like, oh, well, and on top of that, you can after work go upstairs and play games, which I regularly did to try to, I guess, pass time to before going out with everyone else, wherever we're going to go, which I think at that time was Jimmy's Corner.
Jimmy's Corner was the big spot for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. So
yeah. Anyway, yeah. So rather than just wax nostalgic, let's actually talk about the subject of today's episode. So we are talking about Lucy, which is a 2014 sci-fi-ish. It's firmly sci-fi action movie by Luc Besson, starring Scarlett Johansson, with Morgan Freeman being Morgan Freeman in this movie, and I don't like it. I didn't like it. I saw this movie in theaters.
Me too.
For those that know the lore of Case, back when I was doing Friday morning movies with Justin Liebergen
Justin Liebergen
as part of the YouTube series Justin and Vash, or Vash and Justin, whichever way that went. We would go see movies, and then we would do videos about them. Yeah, so I saw this movie with them, and I was so fucking mad when I saw it, and then you suggested that we talk about it for this show, and I was like, yeah, I'm sure we can talk about it, and we'll have some notes, because I remember being really mad when I saw it, and that's at the very least fascinating. And our ethos is we're talking about movies that are fascinating but flawed, and on rewatching it, still don't like it. Just gonna be upfront on that one before anyone listens to this episode and is like, oh man, Case didn't like this movie.
Yeah, I totally agree. I saw it in theaters as well. I was excited because for me, I really like Luc Besson's films, or generally speaking, a few of them. My favorite one of all time is Leon the Professional and The Fifth Element. So I had like going into their expectations. On top of that, I think this is when Scarlett Johansson was really at her, starting to kind of get into her prime of being known, and then you have Morgan Freeman. So overall, I just thought okay, this is gonna be great. And I walked out going like, I actually didn't even walk out thinking, like literally, I think maybe 20, 30 minutes into it, I was like, wow, this is okay. I'm gonna have to drudge through this, and I did, and yeah, I did not like it, and I try to rewatch it with an open mind, even knowing what I knew, and yeah, I started becoming very critical the first minute.
Sam, how about you? What's your experience with this movie?
Today, Amazon. I actually like avoided this film because I mean it was something that I had considered watching, but when everyone I knew was like, no, I was like, oh, okay, dodged a bullet, not gonna spend money on that. And I was correct. I had not seen that film. And today I did, and I was fine with commercial breaks. It gave me time to decompress from just
Oh yeah.
a movie that was more fiction than science, pretending that it was science fiction for sure. I did get some laughs, so that's not the intended thing, but I did giggle. I did giggle during this movie a couple of times, heartily.
Yeah, and I don't want to like. I know I'm saying that I don't like this movie up front, but I don't want to be like so hard that it's not irredeemable in terms of things that are going on in it. Like I think that there's some cool effects, there's some decent visuals in it. Does it translate into great action sequences? But you know what? Like we've talked about Luc Besson before on this show because we talked about Valerian, the City of a Thousand Planets, which I think is a more interesting movie than this in just about every way, and that is a low bar, but not but also faint praise. So.
Well, I'll say that I looked up to see because I was trying to compare the film itself to maybe something that I can ground myself towards. And I think I remember because it's been some time, but Limitless came out prior to. So the idea of like being able to unlock some kind of power within your mind, I remember finding very fascinating. I also loved I guess you could say the independent film aspect of it because I really gravitate towards those types of film. Whereas like you had a movie Push with Chris Evans, which I really
Oh
wanted to
yeah,
like.
yeah.
So like those kinds of things, that kind of world, I really, give a try and say, okay, like I want to sit down. I not only want to enjoy this film, but I also want it to be really well directed, good pacing, all those kinds of things. And I think that you know, originally I remember thinking again, you had this good cast, this writer director who has put out really good product prior to, and is within that timeline, at least in my life, where I enjoyed those kinds of films, and it just wasn't working. And there's a lot of reasonings behind it, but overall, I really wanted to really like it, but I didn't. So
Yeah, I like you mentioned Fifth Element. That's one of my favorite movies of all time.
oh
It's amazing. There's plenty to like in Luc Besson's filmography. We should note Luc Besson had some rape charges against him, which apparently were cleared, but like is the Wikipedia article on like how he was like found like in like what's the wording on this one?
Cleared of charges.
Definitive clearing by the courts
right.
feels very very like trying to overemphasize a like we technically got off the hook situation here. So I don't like I'm not gonna like try to like smear him, but at the same time like yeah. I don't know necessarily like how much I want to champion him either
Right.
in this conversation. I guess is where we sort of end with that point. But suffice it to say, like his early career has like some real bangers that are fantastic, and I wanted this to be great. I wanted Valerian to be great, but it's not.
No, and a fun fact, I actually went to school. Wow, I just lost his name. The lead guy for Valerian. We went to school together. So I went there to
Oh,
support him as well. And
Dane DeHaan.
Dane DeHaan, yeah. Dane was 2 years under me. Really great guy. He went actually in the high school program of the school I went to, and then went to the college program, and then he just blew up. And I was going there not only for Luc Besson, but also to support him. And I definitely enjoyed that movie a lot more than I did with Lucy. But partly, I think, I don't know where we want to get into of like what didn't work, what did work, but like overall, I believed Valerian more than I believed in the world of Lucy.
Yeah, I feel like this movie takes some big swings. And like sometimes that works out for people and I always kind of like feel type of admiration for people who are willing to take those big swings, knowing that they might fail. So I will give the movie this. There's something that it's aspiring to. Like it does not land its message like at like at all. But I will say the performances are good, and there is something that it's trying to say. You're not sure by the end what that was. But I will give the movie that there is like it is it is a fascinating study in a film where there's a lot of ideas happening, but they don't necessarily always connect. And definitely by the end of it, you're like, I don't know what that was supposed to actually like the journey I went on. I feel like I'm high, not that not that there's real resolution. And I feel like, yeah, it's it's not the worst thing I've seen.
No, it's not the worst. It there's some egregious things that are going on in it. Let's break this down for anyone who hasn't actually seen this movie here. So the basic premise is that this character Lucy, who's played by Scarlett Johansson, is turned into a drug mule because of shoddy dealings with like the dude she's dating, while she is carrying this designer drug that's she's supposed to smuggle into somewhere else. The people who are responsible for moving her decide to kick her in the stomach a bunch of times, which is where they like carved her open and inserted the drugs into her stomach. Because this is this like really crazy like drug that they say is supposed to be something secreted by mothers into babies or something like that. It explodes within her. Literally the bag bursts inside of her, and she gets like this crazy dosage of this drug that supposedly unlocks the higher amount of the human brain's consciousness. And then, as a result, she starts developing superpowers and goes through this movie slowly developing more and more super abilities while the gang that tried to use her as a drug mule tries to track her down. And at the same time, she is trying to first figure out if she can survive and then sort of decide what to do with the limited time she has once she realizes that she's in like absorbed so much of this drug that she's definitely going to die, and then action ensues. Is sort of the big thing there.
Right. And there's not, I didn't think there was enough time to set up the world, the characters in which I just that I wanted to care, because at the end of it all, you want to go along this journey and at least either want to or want them to succeed or not. And I didn't feel that at all. And I was thinking about the casting of Morgan Freeman, and I felt that Morgan Freeman was kind of there to, at that point, I feel like Morgan Freeman, if you heard him, you listen to him, he can tell you things and you're like, yeah, I believe it. And I think that's why he was the scientist. And I could be incorrect, but it felt like to me that he was the device to try and sell the science
Wait, we need more we need more quotes around the word science when you say that.
well, and I don't know if he could have written it in a way that helped to establish the science around the world of the world of the film. That's where it just automatically it lost me where I don't know. There's a lot of things that I could say that really can pinpoint the fact that the movie loses you in the first few moments where again you don't really. I didn't really care about Scarlett Johansson's character when she was being pushed to do this thing, and it was cool rewatching. I was like, oh, that guy, that's the guy from Game of Thrones and the show Foundation. So I was like, okay, so I was kind of more interested in that at that moment because I was like looking at my phone trying to figure out what all his movie what his movie biography is, but
Yeah, like I'm a superhero fan. I'm okay with like bad science in a thing. I'm not okay with like hinging everything on the bad science. And this movie is like aggressively into this whole like, what if we unlocked more of our brain thing? And it opens with, I mean, not literally the first scene, but the second scene is Morgan Freeman trying to be like, only dolphins have exceeded the 10% of the brain.
Right.
And like the explanation of it doesn't make any goddamn sense because he's trying to like say at the beginning is like, well, once you have 2 neurons, you can move. And it's like, isn't that using 100% of the brain at that scenario because they only have 2 fucking neurons? And then like beyond just a bad scene, the movie keeps coming back to it. It keeps coming back to talking about like how much of her brain's unlocked. And then they start doing the fucking subtitles where like, or like not subtitles, the title cards where the screen goes black and then it just shows a percentage of how much of her brain has been unlocked.
But remember, he doesn't. He. This is all hypothetical past the 10% because all he knows actually is we use only 10%. Everything beyond that is just hypothetical, and he says it even to a point where when someone asks him, like, what happens after you unlock, past 40%, he's like, we don't know, and it's like, okay, but you when near the end, and she brings in all the scientists to do that whatever she was doing to create the supercomputer, there was no like further questioning from them. It was just like wide open. Yes, she is almost at 100%. And again, I didn't have enough time to really digest what was happening, even from the get-go of the drugs. That was never really explained, or even, you have the antagonist. He was a drug dealer or drug lord or whatnot, chasing after her, but like there was no rhyme or reason except for he just wanted to get his product back, and will do whatever it takes, to the point where he's going to fight with the police. And again, it's just like this world was so extravagant, and I didn't believe it. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, Lucy
Yeah.
is not, she's not cool. Like, she shoots a patient on a table because she's like, oh, he was gonna die anyway. And it's like, bro, you're not like, it's so hard to and I get it, like, oh, she's now, for some reason, now she's using more of her brain, she's losing her humanity, she feels everything but nothing, like whatever. But like that was like that didn't work for me at all, because I was just like, she's a jerk, everyone like gets shot, everyone dies, like she doesn't care about the cost of human life at all. Like, it is just, there's no one that's truly sympathetic in this movie. Like, everyone is just kind of there.
right.
Everyone's kind of there. So I can't believe that cab driver stayed. I wouldn't have waited for her. Like, that was honestly, out of all the most unrealistic things in this film, that is the most unrealistic thing. A half beaten up woman who's bleeding out of her chest gets in your car with a bag of guns and then tells you to wait for her after you dropped her off to the hospital. I'm sorry, I'm leaving. How the fuck is she gonna find me again? She's not, okay? I'm gone. I'm not waiting around to take her to the next spot. I'm sorry, that's not happening. That was ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the thing that was ridiculous in this movie.
That was the main ridiculous thing, Case.
No,
I don't
no,
know
you're
what else
absolutely
you were
right.
talking
Like,
about.
no, you're
Well-
you're absolutely right. This movie is loaded with like these weird details of it. Not the least of which is like the crazy psychic powers that she gets at various points throughout this whole thing.
Right.
Well, that's because her
let
brain
me-
is so connected to the drug and everything. She can just control all matter and time. Duh.
But
Science,
Yes.
Case. Science.
Science. Well, and I'll say this. I was watching it and rewatching it, and I was like, okay, I wasn't afraid that she was going to get hurt in the beginning, which I always find interesting whenever they put like possibly a very famous actor in a position where it's like, oh, are they going to live or die? I didn't care, and I didn't think that she was going to die. So I was like, okay. And then once the transformation, I thought was fascinating, in the fact that, because thinking about it now, I think at that point when bag broke in her stomach, she was at 10%, correct?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or
Yeah.
okay. So at 10%, she was able to start floating up a wall all the way up to the ceiling as this thing is like transforming her insides and changing her to whatever she becomes. At that point, you're like, wait, because in my head, I'm like, how is she on the ceiling? Like there's like she hasn't turned yet, but this thing is turning her. So it's like, I guess this thing is anti-gravity, anti whatever it is, where she gets to be this new thing. And again, like I said, I think at that point, I think I paused the film to be like, oh, where are we? And I believe it was only like 10 or 15 minutes into it. And I was like, oh, and I knew what was going to happen, and I was just like, okay, let me try to give it some more awareness of when does she start to really like, okay, she's going to start questioning herself, right? And she doesn't. She just all of a sudden she goes from this like, oh my gosh, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, and then like she got cut open, and then the bag was put in her, and she was still, like this character of like, very scared, and then she was in this cell. She's still very scared, and then the thing pops open. She's transformed, and also she's like a machine. She has no like she knows where things, and it's like, wait, we're at 10%, and she's like an elite assassin. She's able to like shoot people without having to like miss. And then on top of the fact, like when she goes after the cab driver, she's so her mission was very clear that, and I'm like, wait, how is this happening at 10%? And then I don't even know what percentage it was when she was able to look at it's based in China, correct? Or because I know that
Yes.
the Koreans were after her.
They were in Taiwan.
Taiwan. And she was able to use the words in front of her and somehow scramble it to make sense that in whatever way. And again, I'm just kind of like, wait, she didn't have, there's no self-learning, there's no curve. She just automatically was. And she's only at 15%. And that's where, again, I kept on going because I was like, maybe I can, see certain things. My favorite part of the film, honestly, is whenever she's going back through time, which
Hmm.
I told my wife, I'm like, before watching this movie, I had this idea of like, because I love walking around and kind of trying to figure out like, so when we were in Manhattan before the film, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like this was all forests and trees, and and like indigenous people are roaming this land, and I'm like trying to figure out where maybe someone walked here that was very famous. I like to try and do that, so I really enjoyed that scene where she's going through time and the effects that was going through it. But it was also kind of weird because like you could tell now watching it now, it's not as cool as it was back then, the effects of it. But yeah, I mean, she went through a lot in a short period of time, and I just didn't feel like I was be able to accept it, I guess you could say. The
Yeah,
science.
I agree that I like the. So while I don't want to like bash effects for not holding up when this is only a $40 million budget. Like this isn't like a huge. Well,
Yeah.
but only in the perspective of like a big blockbuster, especially like of the last decade or so. Probably a lot of that went to Scarlett Johansson herself
Yeah.
in terms of in the budget, and Morgan
And
Freeman.
Morgan
So
Freeman. Yeah.
yeah. So like in terms of the effects, like I think that there's a lot of like cool looking effects and creative shots that are in this movie. And I really like the time travel bit where she like does the Michelangelo like touching when she touches the Lucy, like
Oh, yeah.
the which I like this like progenitor for humanity. I think that like that's a nice moment there where she sort of like is the spark of creation for humanity in that moment, like is kind of cool. And I'm all for like this sort of timey-wimey, a person's expanded their consciousness so much so that they're outside of time and can interact and might be the cause of a thing that they are the effect of. Like I think that can all be very cool, and I think that those parts of this movie are fine. The fucking time or like cards just like being like 10%, 20%, 30%, 40, like just emphasizing this goddamn bullshit science when all we needed was just like she's shot up with a fuck ton of drugs and is making her have psychic powers.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Like having like the fact that you had to stop and be like, oh, it's only at 10%. Like, no, she's just been shot up with a shit ton of drugs that give her psychic powers. And like she has to re-up it later in the movie anyway. So might as well just like say like, oh, it was starting to wear off and it's causing her body to break down. Like like just lean into the just being like, oh man, these drugs are making your brain do weird things. Like you don't
Yeah.
even need to like and sorry, spoiler for my pitch, which is just fucking remove this entire pseudoscience bullshit. Like that's the thing that's frustrating, because like her emerging and being able to do like all these like point blank shots, like that's a cool thing, and that like I like I like the idea of that, and I think that they probably go too fast into the psychic powers thing, and it kind of defangs some of the action sequences. But they're cool set piece moments when like all the guns fly up and all the knives fly up into the ceiling.
Those are cool.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
cool
that was
moment.
cool.
And everyone tries to attack her, and they just like fly up into the air, and like that's like cool kind of stuff. Like, do I wish she was a little lower powered earlier in the movie? Yeah, like take a little bit longer and have some points where we could have some convincing action sequences, because she's so unstoppable throughout this movie. Once she's up and running, that it's like we never have her really on the back foot.
Yeah.
And as a result, like the stakes of this movie, like there's the time limit of like how long before her body breaks down, but that's the only like real thing that we're worried about her for. Like once the drugs kick in, you know, like prior to the drugs, we're worried that she's going to be abused. We're worried about all these things. Like, you know, there's a little bit of like protect your white ladies going on at the beginning of the movie, like where it's just like, oh, I'm in a foreign country and they're going to use me for like, they're going to like human traffic me kind of thing, which is like, you know, fine as a premise for a movie.
Yeah.
And like legitimately would be a problem, but it also feels very like stereotypical for the kind of presentation that we're doing, and not actually consistent with like the way human trafficking actually works in all of its horrific ways. Yeah, like after that point, you know, she's this juggernaut that cannot be stopped in any way, shape, or form. There's no like rival who also takes the drugs or something at the end of the movie. Not that I want that. Like, not, you know, like like it. I think that doing a movie that is just about the one character having their consciousness expanded is cool. It just, they lean so heavily on bullshit science that they justify Morgan Freeman being there in the name of explaining bullshit science.
Right.
When he doesn't actually do anything in the fucking movie.
Yeah, he really doesn't.
He takes a USB stick at the end case. Wow. He does so much. And also exposition. Duh.
Exposition. You gotta have the Morgan Freeman voice in there and listen, you know. But yeah, and you know, I would even further say, I feel like they present this film as a way to. I think they take themselves way too seriously. Is what I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
Because if they made it more campy, I think you would have more fun with it. Like, you know, part of what I felt like Fifth Element, how Fifth Element worked, was that there was a lot of fun moments where it wasn't like, you know, yeah, the earth is gonna end or whatever, but like they had a good time with it. There was a lot of good, you know, Chris in Fifth Element, I forgot his name. Anyway, there's a lot of characters in there in Fifth Element. Forget his name.
Character? Wait, which character are we talking about?
In Fifth Element, the guy who he's in
Chris Tucker?
Chris Tucker, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, he was a good fun character to kind of create this fun part of the world where you're like, okay, we're not taking this too seriously. And there's none of that in Lucy, where, you know, you start off with in the beginning, you have these shots of like this animal kingdom, you know, and you're seeing the prey going, the predator going after the prey. And it's like, okay, you're making me feel a certain way. You're wanting my emotions to go a certain way as this film is going through. And like, you know, with her, the setup of her, I guess, having to deliver these drugs, you wanted to have a sense of understanding what's really at stake. And like you said, and I didn't, because I'm like, well, you know, she gets shot at, she's so powerful that she can just like, and everyone's gone, you know, and you don't have a chance to see her, like, again, when she shoots, it's not about like her not being able to be this elite assassin. She can just shoot on target, kill first shot, not having to worry about a second shot. But like her at least being able to comprehend, or me seeing the fact that you know, she's like a little surprised by how she is, because she goes from this, she lost her humanity really, really quick. So there
Yeah.
was no way for her to really like I think the moment that Luc Besson, who I believe also wrote this,
You did, yeah.
yeah, because he writes and directs all. He puts the moment where she's talking to her mother, and it was supposed to be, I feel like, a moment where you're like, oh my gosh, she's like alone in this country now, and she's going through this thing, and then she gets to the weird point of talking about how she can remember sucking on her mom's teat and tasting the milk, and I'm like, okay, that's weird, but like, yeah, I'm going
Yeah.
with it. And then she, oh, I can't hear you, loses it. And then that's like really the only moment she has of her humanity during after the transformation. Whereas in the rest, it just becomes like, even when the cop was like, why do you need me? And she's like, to remember. And she does like that weird head tilt that she does a
And
really
kisses
great
him.
job
Yeah.
at, and kisses
Yeah.
him. And you're like, wait, what? That's the only reason she's, I thought she needed him more than that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really weird. Also, like, I would have loved to see her have keep the humanity while seeing her roommate. Like, because
Mm.
that's like that scene, like when she comes in, she's already kind of feeling this, right? So you've had this awful night. You've had this terrible, terrible night. You've just said goodbye to your mom because you're pretty sure that now that you know how much drugs are in you, and because you have so much of your brain power, you know that you're on borrowed time, and you go back to your apartment to pack up because you're going to head out and you need to use a computer and figure what you're going to do next, and you see your roommate, and like, albeit her roommate just doesn't even really seem to also check in with her. It's like a lot of like chit chat kind of things, that, and I'm like, again, getting into pitch territory a little bit here, but it just feels so weird to have these two women who are living together in a foreign country, chasing their dreams or studying in this foreign country, because it seems like the roommate is a model. And we never know what exactly, like, we know that Scarlett Johansson's character, we know that Lucy has a test coming up. So we don't know, like, what she's studying or how she's going to school or what her expertise is, because we don't really know a lot about her other than she dated a guy for a week and he screwed her over, which, to Case's point, I at least felt a little bit better about the fact that the guy who screwed her over was white. Like, even though she was being hunted down by the Koreans, at least the initial guy was white. I was like, oh, well, I guess, caveat, sort of. In any case, I feel like at the end of the day, right, look, with everything that is happening, that was not the moment for her to lose her humanity. She should have had one more moment of saying goodbye, and this was another chance to have that in the script, like, have her friend not just be like this pretty vapid person that's like, oh my god, where were you, blah 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 blah, let me talk about me, right? Instead of like, my roommate didn't come home last night, she's got some blood on her, she looks like she got beat up because her lip is also busted. Why wouldn't I notice that? And so, like, that's kind of weird because in this movie, there's really only two women in it, and the fact that there is no real bond between the two of them, and it's just odd. It was kind of like this missed moment, and I think it would have been better. And like, again, this is another moment to have Lucy's power, right? She touches her friend, she feels everything, and she's like, take this prescription. She doesn't even tell her where to take it, but it's in Chinese. She tells her to take the prescription, take the medicine, and like live her life better. And it's like, it's so weird. Like, do you care? Do you not care? This is just something you would do for anyone. It feels really, really weird. Like, even when she says, like, oh, how's your boyfriend? I forget his name. It doesn't matter. He's shot in like the first 10 minutes. And she's just like, he's dead. And she's like, oh, you're so funny. And just walks away. And I'm like, who responds like that? What is this?
Yeah.
So I just feel like, I think if she had just had it in that moment, give us a little more, have her kind of like tying up all of her loose ends and kind of giving her friend one last good hug. You could still do the weird, like, your liver is having an issue, drink less, love you, you know, kind of moment. But it just felt kind of strange overall.
Yeah, it felt like that scene was there just so this movie passed the Bechdel test.
They
No, I'm
still
sorry, the
talked
what
about
test?
guys.
Well, but they do pass it because they have like an extended conversation about a variety. The Bechdel test is it started off as a test from by Alison Bechdel. It was a comic writer who did this comic strip where she explains in her comic strip the Bechdel test, which is if a movie features more than one female character, if they have a conversation with each other and it isn't about men.
Oh,
And that's
okay.
considered like the lowest bar of low bars to clear in terms of like base feminism
Okay,
for a movie.
got it.
And you can apply that with the same criteria, but to any sort of like minority group in terms of films in general. And it's not to say that a movie is automatically feminist if it passes, nor is a movie automatically not feminist if it doesn't. But it is like a shockingly low bar that a lot of movies don't pass. Famously, at the time when the comic strip came out, Aliens was the only movie that passed the Bechdel test that was like out in theaters at the time.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Really low bar.
Yeah, really low bar. And so that scene kind of acts to successfully clear that bar, thank Christ, because the rest of the movie doesn't. The rest of the movie doesn't at all. And it sets up some more of her like weird, crazy advancements in terms of her abilities. Like, I think that a lot of the like cool super brain stuff that she gets at low levels, being like, I'm just super smart and super accurate and able to like pick up any knowledge and so forth, like the Phenomenon stuff, the John Travolta movie kind of thing where your brain's just expanding in cool ways before the psychic powers kick in.
Mhm.
Like, I wish there was more of that, like just taking a bit longer before the full-on psychic abilities kick in. Supposedly, when writing this movie, it was with an intent of being like Leon in the first third, like Inception in the second third, and like 2001: A Space Odyssey in the third. And you can see where that is supposed to fit together in this one. Like all the weird, trippy fight stuff is in the middle third of the movie, and then like everything's getting weird, real weird in the final third. That fits, and we get the human trafficking stuff in the first third.
Right.
So the like mission accomplished in terms of like getting those vibes. Yeah, I would have enjoyed more of like, this is what a human operating at a crazy high potential could be actually doing. Sequences like Renaldy, you brought up Limitless as a movie that came before this, that was also like a mind expanding thing, and so I wouldn't mind more of that for a chunk of the movie before we get into the full on psychic ability stuff, because once the psychic ability stuff manifests, the fact that we don't have a rival character who has similar psychic abilities means that she is virtually unstoppable. Like nothing can compare with her once she's that way. And it's only when she's distracted is there any threat in play. That's the whole, like, she's expanding into this weird blood computer in the last third of the movie.
Can I expand on the Limitless stuff? Because as you're talking,
go.
yeah, because I really enjoyed that film. I actually watched it a few times, and I still really enjoy it. And I want to enjoy the TV show, which actually I got to audition for, but didn't get in. But the idea of Limitless was, you just said there's no one in Lucy that was like a rival, right? And I was like, yeah. I was like, okay. Well, then I'm thinking to myself, well, why does Limitless work? But like, because there was a rival and he died, or he was dying in I think in the second, near the second act, near the mid of the film of Limitless. You have the guy who, was a whiz of Wall Street or whatever, that was rivaling Robert De Niro's character, but he was going to die. So that showed again the if you do it incorrectly, using this substance, that it could potentially kill you. You didn't have that with Lucy. You never had a point where, outside of her going really weird and crazy inside the airplane and having to weirdly eat this blue stuff, that was the only moment that you felt like, oh, okay, is she gonna actually have some kind of like breakdown, or she's gonna not make it through, like, and she's gonna turn into something weird. That was the only moment I felt like, oh, okay, cool, that's something different. But overall, again, once she turned, she became so powerful, no one can stop her. And I often think about, like, you're huge into superheroes, and I believe you're a big Superman fan.
Oh yes, my Superman podcast is probably a tip off on that one.
and so, like, that's always, I feel like, a good conversation with Superman is, like, a lot of people think he's just too powerful, but he's not. When you have that humanity that he's having to face to be right or whatever, and there's a physical aspect where he fights certain, Superman way more than I do, but, like, in terms of other characters, you didn't have that with Lucy. So you never had a point where you felt like, even with the villain, he was not, you knew he was not going to be able to get her. Even when he goes in the end and he's, like, putting the gun right to the back of her head. In my head, I'm like, oh, she's about to, like, swallow you with whatever this black thing's that's going up. And then she disappears, and they're like, wait, what? And he shoots and he goes crazy. And, like, again, this guy, when you want to set up a villain, you want to set up someone that you kind of understand where they're coming from. And I didn't, not only not understand what he was saying because I don't speak Korean, but, like, I don't also understand why he was going to the lengths of you. I laughed whenever he brought all of his gangs, or whatever, his group of henchmen, to the was it the laboratory or the science, wherever she was meeting up with Morgan Freeman and the other
It was a
scientists.
university.
Yeah.
Yes, university. And I laughed because he's out there and he's like, okay, let's get it all together. He's getting everyone with the guns. And then in the background, you have all this police cars driving by. And I'm like, these guys are pulling out these AK-40s, whatever, all these machine guns, and ready to go into this building. And you have the police in the background. They all get out of the car, they go inside. They don't see all, like, again, they didn't create this world where I was like, oh, like, watch out, you have all these guns. And obviously they didn't care because they're, so powerful, and they're with all the people that they have. But I knew from the get-go, especially when she was driving through traffic the way she did, there was no way anyone could stop her. And
Yeah.
that was a big miss on the writing at front, the directing front. But again, really cool effects, really cool, moments where people are flying around or whatever. So yeah.
Um, oh, can I bring up another weird fact that's just like so small and insignificant amongst all the other problems of this? IV bags do not go that fast. Like, no matter how much you dilute the, and I know this because I used to take care of my grandfather and I had to hook him up to an IV bag with medication every week, like every night and stuff like that. So I know exactly how long an IV bag filled with fluids would go. Definitely not as fast as they went for her. I don't care how much you dilute that medicine, even regular saline flush, not that fast. So let me just say, that took me really out of it. And I know I was already facing so much, but at that point, I was like, wow, I have suspended so much disbelief. But at this moment, at this very end, when the guys are right outside and the police that you come here to secure the door, even though they could have stopped the guys coming in from the outside and did not, but this is the moment, because this would not enter her system that quickly. It would at least take 45 minutes for that to enter her system relatively as quickly as possible. And also, like, they were not porting it to like actual like, oh my god, there was just like not enough veins on her arms. Guys, there's just so much, and this was so inconsequential, but it really bugged me as a person who regularly set up an IV of fluids for someone else.
Yeah, shockingly, not enough attention to how drugs work in this
Right.
movie.
Oh
Like
yeah.
everyone knows you take something, you got a few minutes before it hits you.
Can we talk about these drugs? Because let me tell you, okay, I just want to know, like, I know that this is not important because the plot doesn't care about it. But okay, so they're planning to sell this stuff, okay? And they test it out on the guy and he giggles a little bit and then they kill him. I don't know how marketable this drug truly is. Like, I don't know if they know what this drug actually does. Like, these are the worst drug dealers. Like, if every time you give a drug to someone, you either kill them or they die, this is not a good product to sell. If your clients die after taking it immediately, this is not a good drug. Stick with the old drugs. You want the person to be an addict before they die. This is a really bad business plan. Okay. Now, if you were telling me that they're developing this, again, pitch territory, for like, I don't know, rich people who want to stay young forever, or like there's some sort of collagen effect, or like, because this is rebuilding cells, right? And like that kind of thing. Maybe, 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 but this drug is a bad drug for the market that maybe they're selling it to. Like, I just guys, these are bad businessmen. Like overall, they're bad businessmen. Yeah, Interpol collects their mules and they go in with guns without covering their face into an area with cameras. These guys are terrible drug dealers. At that point, just let it go. Make new drugs. That's what normal drug dealers do.
That's super valid. I will say, in this movie's defense, I did like when there was like a guy in police protection that they like were able to just like go in and kill, indicating how much power that they have. It kind of made me think of like the scene in like Boondock Saints where they're just like allowed to walk in with guns because the police are on their side, kind of thing. That part I appreciated in this movie because it was like trying to set up just how powerful a criminal organization they were, as the only way that we could establish any kind of rivalry to match Lucy, where it's like, oh well, but he's got so many men under his control, including all the police, and except for a few good cops, kind of thing. But I agree with you. The plans don't make any sense. You would think they would start local in terms of like seeding out this kind of drug, especially since apparently just in Taipei, they just have access to shitloads of Americans everywhere, seeing as how like the first several characters that we actually meet are all like white Americans in this Asian setting.
Yeah, I think if they had a moment to really enjoy, oh, not enjoy, sorry, if they're able to actually see, because I was thinking as you're talking, Sam, about the one guy who snorted that, I think just a piece.
Yeah,
It would be cool to see like what actually, because was he just starting to laugh hysterically because he was starting to turn, or like was he able to then, was he getting about 0.5% of his brain capacity like bringing him to go up to, to be able to control, I don't know, like it would be cool to
right.
see something weird about this drug that then you kind of go, okay, like you didn't get that. At
Yep.
no point did you understand that this drug would create some kind of superpower within a human outside of her, and it was, I guess maybe it's the way she took it because it was direct to her bloodstream. But I don't know, that little piece to go into his brain, I think that would have been an interesting caveat before everything started to happen.
Yeah, I think also like at least if it looked like he was craving what they were
Mm,
about to give him. Like, I think that was like the thing that really bugged me out, right? Like, so he's just like this addict that they're keeping around, testing things on. Have they been testing him on this? Are they shooting him with everything else? Like, you don't know. Like, he looks rough. He looks like he's been experimented on for a while, but the item that they got, we're not even sure if they've had before. Also, the boyfriend getting her to take the case in because he was too afraid to deliver it to himself. Like, things are never really quite clear as to why he has the drug and why he was either returning it or dropping it off or who asked him to. Like, there's no, he's just like a mode to get her upstairs. Like, it's just a jerk guy who she met a week ago who like tricks her into this criminal world and kind of screws her over. But like, there's like, because clearly later on, the Korean guys know exactly who is sending people out, because when she meets the other drug mules, they're all brought by other people, and there's a guy with a new accent, an English guy who's like basically like telling them, and there's four other pouches, right? That's not even the pouch that she had. So like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
why does her boyfriend have it? Like we don't know. There are so many questions in this film that are never actually answered and are just there for a point of convenience. And it's just like, okay, so who sent the drugs? Why are we sending it out? Why is it a great idea to send it out? He opened one of the things in the case, so I assume that that's not one that went into all the other bodies. What happened to that drugs? Like, that's not as important as the other stuff. But the point is, there's a bigger problem than just the science. And the problem is that the bad guy's motivations are unclear. Other than they're bad and they have drugs, and that this drug is a crazy ass drug that opens your brain up, there's no real explanation other than they're gonna sell it as to why they want to sell it. And this is a bad business plan. And guys, I can't get over that. Like, I cannot get over that these are bad drug dealers. Like, not bad in the way that, I mean, they're terrible people. They're murdering people left and right, which, by the way, kudos to hiring the man from Old Boy because he is terrifying. That's not the point. The point is, there's no point to the drug. The drug is just a convenient thing to make her have psychic powers later. Like, that's just it. Like, it's.
well, it would have been cool if that. Well, two things. As you're talking through this, I'm like, okay, well, how can they have at least utilize drugs to help the movie along? And it would have been interesting if they didn't shoot that guy and he comes back maybe in the third act because they're like, oh, we
Mhm.
need to get this guy, whatever, right? And there's maybe a fight, a cool fight scene. Maybe this cliche, I don't know. But to me, that seems more interesting. Or the very cliche thing to do is to get, Choi, the ultimate villain, if he sees that she's able to do all of these things after the fact that she took those blades and severed his hands, well, not severed, but stabbed him, and he sees that you just said, where did those drugs go from that first guy? If he then ingested those and there was some type of battle where you see that she has somewhat of an equal, maybe she wins ultimately because that's how it should end, maybe, or not. I'm actually a fan sometimes when the protagonist actually doesn't win, but somehow wins in another way. That would have been a more interesting choice because at least again you have someone to be able to go against her and have some type of way to hurt her, in some capacity. But it doesn't happen. And yes, because they're really bad businessmen, they're also really bad at being able to see, hey, this can enable me to fight her. I guess you could say fire with fire, so that we have some chance to get our product back that then we would sell to get other superhuman people to be superhuman, which is another weird thing because you'd think that, okay, maybe we should take it ourselves and then we can conquer the world with this drug.
Or at least pick out the people who you're going to subject the drug to, as opposed to being like, we're going to sell it on the open market.
Yeah, agreed.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I also, I just am sad that we never, I feel like, when we get to the scene with I think he's British, the British guy explaining like that they're all going to go to their home countries. I thought, oh, so Choi is working for this guy because he seemed to be calling the shots, right? But he never comes back in. Like he never comes back in as like some shadowy figure behind it all. Like I really had this like headcanon while I was watching it that somehow he would come but to collect her like as a prize because like she had survived the drug, like to do tests on her. And that never happened. Like that's not what happened at all. Because I just thought, oh, okay. So this is like his product and he hired these guys to like kind of take care of his dirty work. They're the cleanup crew. And so like I get it. Troy's much more intimidating. And so if you want someone to go in with a gun battle, that's who you want. But it just kind of felt like we were missing that, I don't know, that snarky villain feeling that you get with a man who lets everyone else do the murdering for him and just walks in to collect the prizes. And I kind of missed that because I thought that we were going to get that. I don't know, I thought we were going to be like, some applause or like, no, no, don't do it. She's marvelous. Hand it over to me. Something like that. I don't know. But we didn't. We didn't get that because this
We
movie
didn't.
doesn't like to tie any ends at all.
Nope. It
No.
doesn't even like to like sit in the potential horror that it could establish. Like the movie, they hand wave this very quickly as being a synthetic drug. Specifically, it is CPH4, which they say like is produced in small quantities by pregnant women. And then they're like, man, they must have developed a synthetic one. You know what would be even more horrifying is if they were harvesting pregnant women.
Yes.
Oh.
That would
Which
be
would explain why this drug is so
horrifying.
valuable.
And why you want to go to find your mules and cut them open and bring it back. Because the thing is, I thought, well, if it's synthetic, like, okay, so here's the thing. Yes, it probably costs a lot to make, even if it's synthetic. But as a criminal, you're not going to expose yourself to Interpol. Like, it's just like the cost of doing business. Like, once it's in there somewhere, like maybe if you can get someone to steal it from like an evidence locker later, that would make more sense, right? Like, it doesn't make sense to go in guns blazing, show your face, have to clean up all of that stuff. I watch enough murder documentaries to know that's just not worth it. Okay. And so I just think that like, but if you were harvesting from actual humans that you had to traffic, well, that's different. That's a horse of a different color. And way more horrific.
Yeah, like that. It's just this movie. One of you said that these were scenes of convenience. I forget specifically.
Yeah, I think it was me.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was you.
That these, and I think that's true. I think this movie was. I have this idea of different cool scenes that I want to put in a movie. What is the connective tissue that will get us to those cool scenes? And that this movie isn't really doing a lot to justify those scenes besides just saying like, look how fucking cool these scenes are. But I don't think the movie is actually that cool. Like, I think it's like fine. I think like there's like cool visuals in it, but I don't think it's like that cool that you're like, oh, this justifies this movie.
I think Luke probably heard this, 10% of the brain, which I did a quick like search to figure out where that originally came from because I always thought it was interesting, and it was from the book How to Influence People in, what is it called, from back in the day?
Win Friends and Influence People.
Only yes. And I was like, okay, like there's there's a Ford, and the writing says Professor William James of Harvard used to say that the average man develops only 10% of his Latin mental ability, which I was like, as one who's always wanted to try to write something interesting and cool, I'll find these little things, and I'm like, oh, 10%. I'm sure he was like, what can I do with that? Can I make it a philosophical film, but yet also action, you know, thriller, and with, because he likes to be really cool with effects and stuff like that, at least from what I remember oh no, I guess not all of his films. I don't think there was a purpose. I think that's what you said. It would go 40%, 50%, 60%. He really stuck to that because part of it is like he was wanting to see the evolution of this human turning into and then what does she ultimately become? A supercomputer? But like,
She becomes energy. She's everywhere. She's able to interact with.
right.
She becomes
Everything.
outside of space-time effectively.
And I think about like one of my favorite films, because I think about the philosophy of this film and action. I love The Matrix. Really, really worked because I don't know, it's really cool. I'm trying to think.
Well, no. Thank you for mentioning The Matrix, because I've been actually sitting on a Matrix comparison this whole time, which is
okay.
that I think that movie does a lot of the sort of expanding your mind kind of things that this movie is trying to do, but they do it too fast.
Yes, pacing
Yeah.
is way too fast. You don't care. You care about Neo. You care about Mr. Anderson before he becomes Neo. Lucy, you don't.
Well, just like the fact that she gets these like crazy powers so early relative to everything else. Like it defangs the stakes of the situation.
Right.
It's just excuses for these over the top like effects pieces, but they're not even like that complicated. Like the things like where the guns like fly up to the air, and then like the people in turn like float up. Like those are cool moments in there, but like they should have happened later in the movie as her powers develop like further along. Like we should have had more times of her being like peak human before she becomes post human.
Well, and yes, and talking about the Matrix, when he stopped the bullets, it was such a good moment because you were like waiting for that moment where he becomes the one, and then he gets to see the Matrix. That was all, and I can't think of the word. I don't know why I'm not thinking of words tonight, but it was all built up to a point, and then you were able to go and say, "Wow, yes, that's it."
It was
Like,
cathartic.
yes, yes, and you did not get that with her in any part of the film. You didn't care about her, which I think is a disservice to Scarlett Johansson because I think she's a fantastic actress. And you didn't get it in terms of the film itself, which is a disservice in terms of the writing because you did not care about. At least I didn't care about anyone. And I'm trying to think, is there anyone in that movie? If something were to happen, I would care about. I kind of, in a way, the cop. I was like sad whenever she was like, "You're here because I want to remember," and she kisses him. So I was like, "Oh," and like you could see after that moment, he was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." And then he goes and like he literally sacrifices his life almost because he gets shot in the neck, And I'm like, "Oh
Mhm.
no, like he's gonna die." Like I kind of care about him, if anything. I kind of care about the villain in a certain way because I want him to not in a way because of him being a villain, but like I'm just trying to justify who I can care about, and yet the one person I should care about is Lucy and or Morgan Freeman's character for him to be able to understand this what's happening and rationalize it because he just did this whole speech in the beginning of the film teaching people of how the brain could get to 100%, and like I never felt like he was able to really get what he wanted. So yeah, to compare it to the Matrix, when Neo finally stops the bullet and then he jumps into Agent Smith, and at the end when he's like, it calls and he flies up, that was like an awesome moment. I remember walking out of the theater and be like, "Oh, I can't wait for the next one." This one, once she becomes a supercomputer and she was everywhere, I think it was supposed to have that effect, but I walked out of the movie going like, well, I mean, sure, cool, okay, yeah, now on to the next film.
Yeah. For me, it was the cab driver. He's the one person I would have been really sad if something happened to. He just didn't seem to really be, he was just an innocent bystander, and I felt really bad for him. Other than that, I was just like, I don't know, guys. Like, I think in the very beginning, when Lucy was just when she's freaking out, about being sent up to this room and in the crazy predicament that she's in, like I was like, oh shit, that would really fucking suck, right? And so I did have this thing, but then once she loses her humanity, I'm sorry, like it is kind of hard to sympathize with her when she walks into an operating room, looks at like what's going on, decides for the doctors and for everyone there that this guy's not going to make it, shoots him, pushes him off the table, and gets on. It's just a very callous thing to do. And at that point, like for me, the sympathy I had built up for Lucy and even the camaraderie as a woman who's like, yeah, foreign country and a man screwing you over and now you're in this fucked up situation and the guy who was guarding you wanted to rape you and that's so fucked up and you're so traumatized at this moment, or you should be. But she's so cold. Like she has no empathy for that person that the doctors are working on. She makes a cold hard judgment that we are supposed to trust. She knows better because she's now on this drug. And she just pushes that person over, gets her stuff done, calls her mom, makes the weird milk comment, although she does thank them for thousands of kisses on her forehead, which she still remembers feeling, which is very nice. Kind of makes up for it, not really, and then walks away. And at that point, I was just like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I actually care. Like, I don't. I don't know if I care for this character. I didn't hate her, but I was just like, oh, you are no longer kind of living in this human world. You are more digital. Like she even sees the energy in the trees and things like that. But it doesn't make her more empathetic or like one with the earth. No, 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 no. It makes her colder and more robotic. And yeah, just more like less sympathetic to the molecules around her, which I thought was a weird way to go, right? Because with Neo, and I think this is the thing about the Matrix, with the Matrix, it's about unplugging, right? It's about finding human connection again. With Lucy, she's losing her human connection. She's absolutely becoming less human. She doesn't worry about the people she's endangering with her driving. She just knows that she's super capable of driving really well. She doesn't care about the people who are being shot outside. She tells the police officer to guard the door because she's going to be distracted, but she doesn't give him any knowledge other than the guys are coming. She doesn't tell him how many people. She doesn't give him like a count. Like she's not a superhero. She's got superpowers, but Lucy's not a hero in any
Yeah.
way, shape, or form. And Neo is, right? Like Neo is a hero. Like
Yeah.
he is definitely taking into account what his actions might do to others, like and in all ways, like he actually questions if it's actually noble to disconnect people if they're happy living in the Matrix. Is that being connected to the Matrix, and that ignorance actually better because the world that he's living in now, the freedom that he has, it's harsher, like, but it is freedom. And so like he even like weighs that. Lucy does not care. Lucy Lucy doesn't even care about the cop. She just wants him around for her own selfish reasons. She wants him around to remind herself that once upon a time, she used to like to screw guys. Like she doesn't seem like that attached to him. She just wants to remember that she liked to touch another human. Like that's it.
I will say, at least to its credit, it does feel like a gender reversal of how this would normally go.
Fair enough, yes.
Like, and so I'm kind of okay with him being a tag along, like his girl Friday kind of character.
Yeah. I'm good with that. He like him being in the passenger seat. Perfect. But still.
I do as you're going through this film of trying to see, if she cares and she doesn't. I question, like, okay, so that microchip that she finally gives is to
Yeah.
teach mankind, correct?
Yes. And that's because of Morgan Freeman, right? Because Morgan Freeman, she asks him what she should do.
Right.
Because she doesn't understand what she's going to do with the last 24 to 48. It keeps changing the time. 48, 72 hours of her life.
It's Dragon Ball Z rules. The next 5 minutes, the planet's going to blow up.
Exactly.
6 episodes later.
Even though it like this movie tells us the only measurement in this world is not math and not letters, but just time, which time is math, but not the point. The point is she decides, because Morgan Freeman tells her that she should do what any other cell does and pass on the information.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. That just reminded me of another science rant where it's just like, in an environment where it's not hospitable, they'll become immortal. And in environments where it is hospitable, they will just breed. Like, Jesus Christ, like the science is so fucking bad in this movie. Yeah, it made me angry and took me out of the movie every time I've watched it.
Yeah.
But what information? Sorry, go ahead.
We don't know. That's the thing. She goes there. She goes there to basically give him the supercomputer, which is her brain. Right? Like that's how I took it. She's basically becoming part of everything and giving him herself, the supercomputer. And then I guess mankind can just ask Lucy what's going to happen and she can time travel. The movie doesn't know. The movie doesn't actually know. But that is the inference. The inference is that Lucy will be everywhere in time and space. And now in the doctor's hand, which is the most capable hand, the only hand she trusts, a person who quests for knowledge, he'll have that. He'll have access to Lucy and she'll pass along the information. Even though she told him that the only information, the only measurement is time, which this movie does not adhere to because there is no adherence to actual time.
But she also only goes back in time, and I don't know, does she have the capability to go forward in time? And I would really be interested if Luke decided to write a film that is set in this world where after Lucy becomes everywhere, what happens like that? Like is the world now a better place because she's everywhere? Are there other people that's going to take advantage of her being everywhere and try like I think that would be fascinating. But again, the information that was given, I would love to know what that is because at least there's something for me to be like, oh, okay, good. At least that happened. Whereas nothing throughout the whole film to me made sense. And when you said that she said, time only matters, I totally forgot about that because I was so caught up on all the other things that like, okay, cool, like time only matters. So that means that like we are a speck of dust in this, multiverse of madness, and for us to be able to live and enjoy every second, cool. But and you also said like, losing her humanity. It was way too fast. I don't think there's a point where I could say she slowly lose her humanity. I think once
It's
she
lost pretty
turned,
much as, yeah.
yeah, it was like boom. I guess in a way you can say once you hit past 10%, you're not you are no longer human.
No, you're a dolphin.
Yeah. Well, dolphins
Yeah.
still they love people.
They love people too much.
Too much.
At times they
Too
can.
much.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are criminals, those dolphins. Many, many times.
Look, I think we're kind of dancing around pitch territory here.
Yeah.
So I think we should take a pause, shout out one of the shows on our network. And when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation and kind of get into what we would have done to sort of make this a stronger movie.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
All right. So we'll be back in a sec. When we do, we're going to have some pitches.
Are you tired of watching your beloved characters being tortured by careless authors?
Are you sick of feeling like they could have swapped out all of the painful action and the plot would remain untouched? Subscribe to Books That Burn, the fortnightly book review podcast focusing on fictional depictions of trauma.
We assume that the characters' reactions are reasonable and focus on how badly or well they were served by their authors.
Join us for our minor character spotlights, main character discussions, and favorite non-traumatic things in the dark books we love.
Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. All right. So, Renaldy, here's the deal. We have one hard rule on this show, which is that I am not allowed to go before Sam in this conversation here. This can be a collaborative process, or it could be like suggesting full pitches, but I just can't go before Sam because one time I brought a 3-page outline for a movie that she was not. It was like our third time recording. She was not ready for Case going full case on a movie.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm going to go full case on this movie. This is one where I have a lot of venting and not necessarily a lot of fixes necessarily for it. But that's the hard rule of the show. And then the general ethos of the show is that we are trying to be realistic for the time of production. So this was the ascendancy of Morgan Freeman in his career. Like his star faded a little bit over time just because, you can only be so on top of everything for so long. Scarlett Johansson is coming off of big wins with like the Avengers right here. She's a super huge star right here. So like having a conversation about like, well, maybe it was supposed to be Angelina Jolie in this role, like isn't going to really like mean anything for like practical considerations. Like the movie got made because they had the people attached to it that they had attached to it. But we can still speculate on what could have been done that would have been smarter in this thing. And I think because we've got a writer director who was basically given $40 million to make a movie without it really mattering what the movie was, I think there's some ground for us to chat about all this. So Renaldy, would you like to take the first swing at just like suggesting fixes, or would you like Sam to take the first swing? In the event that Sam goes first, I am able to follow up and you're able to go last. I'm just not able to go first in this situation.
Got it. I can try and take a swing at seeing some thoughts on how I would have written and possibly directed the film myself, the Rinaldi version. And that's to say, the largest issue I had was I didn't care about the characters. And and part of that is honestly because of how the pacing of the film was, where you did not see her lose her humanity. So I would have it where as maybe she gets these broad strokes of powers intermittently, and she's able to use them. But as she uses them, certain things maybe happen where she shoots someone and she sees like, okay, that affects her. How does it affect her? So I would work on her character to be able to really try to deal with the fact that she has these powers and the consequences of these powers, because with great power comes great responsibility, that she's able to really, she's trying to stop herself, but it's about survival. And, rather than seeing, because I feel like the whole film, you're seeing this 10, 20, 40%. I think and it's about time, right? I think you delve more into the time effect of it and really say, okay, she has only so much time to survive. And she really needs to be able to, we really want her to accomplish that 100%. But how we get there is going to be something that we'll need, I think is more fascinating to see if she were to have to fight certain villains that are, like they chose a great character in Choi, sorry, actor in Choi. And the opening scene of his introduction was awesome, coming out of the bathroom. But outside of that, and him rinsing his hands in blood, he's got like typical, I guess you could say, villain aspects. That character work could have been better. And maybe he's just not the ultimate villain. And the ultimate villain is herself, fighting herself, trying to keep her humanity, as well as accomplishing this 100% goal. Because if she stays human, she's going to die. If she reaches 100%, she'll at least survive. And, then we'll see where we go from there. I feel like that's a big aspect of it. So character work, the pacing of it, and really seeing her evolve in a way where I care about her and the people around her. And when you are a perfect being essentially, and she's not even, and that's even a weird thing to think about. She's not 100%, but she's perfect enough to know how to weave through traffic without dying, but she's killing other people. For her to be able to see that and stop and pause at some moments and try to understand, because the only time she says to remember is when she kisses the cop. It's not strong enough. There's not a strong enough stake for her to really want to remember. She's just continually bulldozing throughout the whole process just to get 100%. So I feel that those mechanisms could have been well defined, really taken more effort to showcase the humanity of it all, with all aspects, her, the villain, the doctor, the cop to a certain degree, the cab driver. Maybe the cab driver needs to be around a little bit more in the beginning, because that would have been interesting. And really being able to delve more into the character work and less on the action, and the payoff, which is the word I was trying to think of earlier. I think the payoff of it all is the action in the end, and you'll just have intermittent actions throughout. But once she turns, it's all action. There's nothing else. There's the plot points were just kind of like 30 of them in a way, just to get us to get to 100%. So I feel that would better the film, but that's just my opinion.
No, I think you make really strong points there. Like the character work in this is lacking. Even actors who are typically very strong in their pieces just aren't very compelling in this. Like Scarlett Johansson, I don't think is a very compelling character for the majority of the movie. Like we get a little bit with her being like very scared at the beginning, but like once she's got the drugs in her system, she's so wooden in a way that isn't like a Spock kind of charming wooden. It's not stoicism for the sake of being interesting. It's just there. And like, I'm not saying it's her fault necessarily, but it certainly just comes across very stiff. And like Morgan Freeman, who is, it's Morgan fucking Freeman. This is the words when I bumped into him by accident on the street in New York, my first year living in New York. And I was like, wow. Oh my God, I was on the phone and I like literally like, I didn't literally bump into him. I like walked right by him as he was like leaving a show, and I'm on the phone. I'm like, and it's like, what was that? It's Morgan fucking Freeman. It's Morgan fucking Freeman. Like, like he's of course a treasure as an actor, but he's not providing much, and none of the characters are providing a whole lot. Like even the villain in Choi is like, he's so over the top when he comes in that everything after that is just sort of like not an escalation of how bad he is. Like there's no additional horror to this man because the first time we see him, he's just like bathed in blood.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
For sure. And I would even say, being able to see, like, I think about I think you even said horror a few times. I'm like, wow, this would have been an interesting horror film, if anything else. Because I think about there's a film Passenger. Someone had rewritten had the idea of like, what if that film was actually a horror film, where you don't see it from his perspective, you see it from her perspective, and it's just like, oh, that's interesting. And like for this, maybe we don't really follow. Even Lucy is the character, the titular line. Maybe we follow it from the choice perspective, because I just think that was the most interesting, honestly, part of the film. I mean, the action's cool and all right, but his introduction was so fascinating, so strong, not only because of the actor, but I think because of the writing in that part, that maybe we follow through his point of view, where he's seeing all these things, and then that could be another maybe avenue where maybe we see it from two perspectives, maybe his perspective and the doctor's perspective, and you barely see Lucy outside of the weird cool things that happen. And then because I don't know if there's anything you can do for her, because the movie would have to be, because I was looking at my notes and I looked at I had written down the time in which I was like, oh wow, she realized, wait, hold on, my notes are, where are you? Something about when I was like, how long has this movie been? I'm trying to look through my notes. It was at 45 minutes, I remember, where I looked and said, oh, we're halfway through the film, and yet I felt like it was okay, again, I didn't realize that 45 minutes in is when she confesses she doesn't feel human. And I was like thinking to myself, it's been 45 minutes, which is a pretty long part for a film, but I still at no point thought to myself, I thought 45 minutes, if I were to actually, if you're like, hey, don't look at the time, how long do you think the movie's been? I would have been like, oh, it's been 5 minutes, because the pacing is so fast. So maybe a way to change up the perspective of it all is that you're not watching it through her angle, but more so his, and maybe the doctor. And maybe the payoff is when you finally see her in the third act or something, then you get all of it there, because maybe the point of it is she's not human when she ingests all of it. Maybe that's another way. Sorry.
No, sorry. Like these are good notes about the characters. Yeah, no, like I said, I think that you really highlighted like a lot of the flaws of this film beyond just the bad science. Like it is breakneck pace and doesn't give you a chance to really absorb the status quo shifts that occur in this movie.
Right. Yeah, because like I think when it comes down to science of the world, to make it believable, there's a lot of times where you have established, like we talk about Marvel and how people can fly, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, because that's been established for years, right? And I think of other films where you have The Matrix when it first came out. There was not a film like The Matrix in which both action and philosophically speaking, and I believed it because they were able to establish everything in a good pace, and they focused on the right things. And I don't think they really focused on the science. And this is a very science, quote unquote, science driven film because of the whole 10% myth and how do they build upon that. So it would be interesting to see if they could just do something, if they were to remake this, to do try, where you're looking more towards character than the plot of the 10%.
Yes, 100%.
Yes.
But Tish. Sam, what are your thoughts, since I'm not able to go
before
So
me?
Yeah.
So similar thoughts. I actually think that I want to spend a little more time, and I want to give Scarlett Johansson, who is a good actress, a little more time to be Lucy the person. And so I'm okay with the pace in the beginning, but I do think that when she says she can feel everything, I want to see the stage where she feels everything. Like, instead of shooting the guy on the hospital bed, right? Instead of walking up and being very clinical and looking at like his scans, I think it would be great for her to go over there and touch him, right? Because this gives us the first precursor that she can actually like feel synapses and kind of things like that. And then maybe not even have her shoot him, because we have enough guns in this movie. I don't know if Lucy really needs to be the person using the guns. Have her kind of just like touch him in a way where it's like, maybe even just down the face, and then it flatlines. And she's just like, I'm sorry, he was in so much pain. He was going to die anyway. I really need your help. And that way, at least we can still have that plot point where she like desperately needs the doctors to take care of her and kind of goes into that room. But we have a little humanity left in her, where like the person she went into it's kind of like a losing zero-sum game for them. And she gives them a peaceful ending where she just takes them down, no more suffering, nothing. Like, that's it. And then I think it'd be like kind of fun to have her go through like these periods of like kind of like, okay, so like she's in the cab, right? And she's hearing all of the conversations from really far away. I think like this is such a usual trope thing, but why is not hearing that many voices as you're learning Chinese not driving her fucking mad, right? Like, let her have a little more adjustment period to this drug, to the like, oh my God, this is so much. Like, this is like,
Mhm.
And like, then you have a moment to actually create comedy, because the driver who's already kind of afraid of her can be like, are you okay? Like, oh, like, it's just like, drive on, drive on. I'm having a bad night. Just stick with me, and you're like, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, she's like
I
tripping balls, but like moments of lucidity.
right.
Lucidity.
Lucidity. Puns. And like, let the cab driver, who is the only character I care about, let the cab driver have a little more in this, because maybe he sticks with her because he has a daughter, and he's just like, maybe like not even have her like shoot the other driver, maybe have her point the gun at him, threaten him, and then the other guy be like, all right, you've had a bad night, get in my cab, let's just go, because he sees the state of her. And have something that's already like sympathetic to this person who's been through like the fucking worst. And then that way, at least she has like this ally that she didn't have before. And that explains why he stays, because the woman who shot his friend in the knee is not someone you stay for. Okay. So he stays for her because, and maybe like, from his like rear view mirror, let's like maybe have a picture of him and a little girl. So we know that he's a father, right? We don't have to do a lot of explaining. He doesn't have to have a conversation, but you can focus in on that to know that like he sees a woman in distress and he sees his daughter, and he doesn't want to like abandon this person, right? So and he's gonna be like, you okay? You okay? She's like, yeah, I just need to go home. I just need to get home. When she gets home, I want her roommate to fucking care. I don't want her roommate to be a person that is like so detached that she's so obsessed with herself. Just because now this roommate will give us more about Lucy's life. We actually don't know a lot about Lucy, okay? And this is the only point other than her saying that like her parents gave her 1,000 kisses, which by the way, we are definitely taking out that mother's milk part because that is disgusting and weird and no, okay? And honestly, that line makes me believe that the allegations are true, sir. Like, absolutely. I don't care what the court said about you. That's freaking weird, okay?
Wow.
No one's going to tell their mom that they remembered the taste of their milk. There's something weird and incestuous about it. It's fucking weird. In any way, so I remember you cradling me is something I would say to my mother. Okay, I wouldn't talk about the delicacies she fed me ever. So anyway, I'm going to say that this is the moment that we learn more about her. Like, oh, like I told you, like that guy was bad news. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's fine. You don't look fine. Like, I want to have these two women have like an actual relationship and not just two people that are living with each other in Taiwan because they both have American accents. And I want her friend to be like, I want to see her giggle like uncontrollably all of a sudden and her friend get like really freaked out because she's tripping balls. Like she's like this shit is like taking over. She had to take more, right? She took more. She learned how much she has. She has the rest. She knows that she might need it. And like I want her to like kind of know. I want her friend to grab her bag and be like, I got this. And she'll like, no, 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 you don't have it. And her friend will be like, what the fuck? And she's like, no, no, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And then hug her. She can still tell her about the stuff because that reinforces what happens at the hospital, right? Which I just made up. And so now we've got like a set of her synapses and things like that. She's like, I just need to use your laptop. And the friend is like, okay, I'm gonna take a shower, but are you sure you're fine? Fine. All of that can happen. She can still pack her bags. Her friend can be like, well, where are you going? And she's like, I'm going home. Have her lie to her friend. Have her tell her friend where she's going so that you have someone who like humanizes this character, right? Like this is the only person besides the horrible, convenient boyfriend that like that we know knew Lucy before she's kidnapped by a drug ring. So let's use this character to flesh Lucy out so that we know that who she is. She's a good student. She came to Taiwan. What is she studying? All of this can happen in this test. Oh, but you have your poli-sci test. You have your physics test. Have her be a physicist, which makes sense because time is both mathematical and a physical manifestation. And maybe she figures out that it's more physical manifestation, and we just use the mathematics to define it because that's how our 10% brains can comprehend it, right? And Lucy's about to become infinity, which is why Lucy touches the you know ancient Lucy, the first woman Lucy. Oh
Yeah,
my
the
God, full circle.
Australopithecus Lucy. Yeah.
Right, yes. And so, but like maybe this is why, because people with advanced degrees go to different places to study with specific professors. So like maybe she's already somewhat like familiar with Morgan Freeman's papers, right? Not because it's something within her particular study, like her source of study, but because it's just like something that has gone around in academics. Maybe there's even something that she remembers, like, oh my God, there's that one brain scientist dude that like has that theory, and like, oh yeah, 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 I have a paper on that. She can look at that and then she can get on the laptop and start doing her crazy typing thing that she needs to do. And I think that in this way, because we need to build Lucy up in order to like really like care about her. And I would like her to, because she feels everything in the beginning, to just be more sympathetic and empathetic in every way. Like this is a woman who has literally been screwed over by someone she was dating. She's been pulled in by mobsters. She's been scared by them. She was put into a holding cell till her flight was going to get. The guys tried to rape her, and she was stabbed. And that stabbing has now drugged her with a drug that is going to kill her. Like in all like honesty, we should have so much sympathy for poor Lucy because her journey is a freaking nightmare. But because they turn her into just this femme robot, we don't really feel that throughout the film. So I would love for this friend to do that. And I think the cab driver can humanize her too, right? Because everybody needs a good like thing. In fact, he can even still be waiting for her to drive her to the airport, one last goodbye, and wish her good luck and be like, you were on the news. And she'll be like, oh crap. And then she can do that weird thing where she changes her hair, which is weird. Fine, we're gonna give her that ability. She's only at 20%. What is that? You know what? She's gonna wear a wig because her friend who goes on modeling gigs has fucking wigs. And that is what we're going to do because that makes a lot more sense. And like,
Oh, but it's not a trailer shot though. Like that hair transformation's in the trailer.
oh, you're right.
Oh,
You're
was
right.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Fine. We'll still go with the bad science because it's bad science anyway. We don't want to change the trailer, and it's a special effect that they spent money on. Fine. She'll still change her head, and the driver will get one last reaction shot of him, which will be comedy because he'll be like, "What the fuck?" and she'll just go to the airport, and it'll be great because we will infuse some of that much needed joy back into this film because this film is incredibly flat. Also, during Morgan Freeman's like explanation of the bad science, I need a few less clips. I don't need to see as many animals fucking. Like, I get the point. Like, I just don't need to see it. And I don't need every question to go back to a picture. I understand the artistic thought of like, let's shuffle our brains and move quickly, and it's part of the pacing, but also like the audience is not dumb. We do not need a picture example for everything that he says. The science is dumb, not the audience. Like this movie's just dumb in the science department, but I think that needs to be cut back a little bit.
A little bit.
A lot of it. Fine. I was being nice. I was being nice, Case. Definitely for that. I think that the cop is fine. The cop is fine. His reactions are great. Like he did a great job, whatever. Do I wish Lucy had thrown more punches? Maybe because I've seen Scarlett Johansson throw punches before, and it kind of felt sad that everyone was just flying up into the air. I feel like knives fly into the air. I think maybe
like it feels like a wasted opportunity that she's like she doesn't actually do that much action in this movie.
Right.
Yeah,
and so I feel like the weapons flying up into the air, A+, loved it, right? Putting the guy into the mime box, especially in Paris, hilarious, loved it. Like I actually giggled a little bit. Can't get past her magic barrier. But I think that the other guys, like, don't just levitate them. I mean, you can levitate one or two, but I do think that like there should be some punches thrown and dodged and some stuff because it was just so weird and easy and too leveled up and just kind of like, I don't know, there wasn't enough of a challenge and it was kind of boring because we already saw the knives fly up and the scene where she made all the cops fall asleep, that was way better. And I kept thinking, why didn't she just do that? Because you already did that.
She does that first and then the fly up thing happens. And like, it's a way more effective scene.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if you want to use D&D rules, the sleep spell only really works in like first level creatures. And
fair enough.
But telekinesis is a 5th level spell.
Yeah, true. But you know what I mean? Like in terms of like, I want to speak to you alone. And he's like, I don't think so. Then she puts everyone to sleep and they're talking alone. Amazing, right?
Yeah.
Also, like, even if she had just thrown the guys against the wall, I think maybe I wanted to see them knocked out. They just murdered a bunch of people, like, at least they murdered a bunch of cops and they murdered the 3 mules to cut their stomachs open. don't know. I think some head bashing is deserved in this moment. And so I think it would have been better if she had thrown them against walls and knocked them out, kind of just like out of my way, let someone throw a punch, smiled at them and flicked them with just a finger, sent them flying, like something like that, because I think it would have made it more dynamic. And I just felt like that was really boring. Like I feel like the director thought it was like hot to watch her just walk forward like a model as they all rose in the sky with her power. But instead, because there were special effects, Scarlett Johansson just kind of looked wooden, like looking straight ahead at whatever ball they told her to look at while these guys flew up. And I think the direction was like, you're unbothered, like you just can't be bothered because you're above all this.
Mhm.
But I don't feel like it played well, and I don't feel like it felt dynamic in that moment. So I think it would have been much better to have almost like the good old fashioned one-on-one kung fu strategy where the bad guys come at her one-on-one, she's just kind of flicking them away, and she doesn't have to actually physically fight them, but it would have been cool to see her like dodge one, smile, knock them out, like, or make him drop to his knees and give a couple of levels for that. And you still could have had the shot where like one or two of them were like floating in the air while the others were passed out, and the cop being like, oh shit, because it's still an oh shit moment. But I just feel like that scene in particular was, for me, a letdown. Like it just wasn't dynamic enough. And especially after seeing the other things she had done, I was like, I wanted more from this. And I know this is not necessarily like she's an amazing fighting spy, but I think like she could have used her telekinesis more like Magneto bends metal and just kind of sends people flying. It just would have been more. I wanted to see heads bashed in that moment, like to make it really satisfying. And then, sure, she gets to the thing. I don't know how I feel about the driving scene, only because, like, I feel really bad that all those people died. And also, I feel bad for the fruit stand. Actually, other than the cab driver, I feel really bad for that fruit stand and the fruit stand owner. It's
Like
unnecessary.
cabbages.
Exactly. You know what? I get it. People love a high speed car chase. So I'm going to leave it alone, even though technically I'm not crazy about the amount of destruction it did or the amount of people she killed. But I do think that like we got to fix the cop thing. Like the standoff should be like more outside and then them falling back against the Koreans, because like it's just so stupid that they run in. And like I understand that this is in France and the Louvre thing did happen recently, but I want to like give sorry France, I had to rub it in. But
The
but
password was Louvre. The password was Louvre.
the new password is going to be Louvre123. So they will update it. Maybe some sort of symbol, to keep it safe. But I just think that it's weird to have a bunch of cops run in and like not see these guys who are blatantly getting out of their car with their guns. Like I feel like the standoff should have started there to give the professor and Lucy more time. Also, I definitely think that the drugs should have been injected into her with needles, because that doesn't take 45 minutes. And I am dying on that hill because that would make a whole lot more sense. And we don't have enough time, okay? Like, we just don't. Like, there's not enough police forces standing in front of them.
Yeah, you could get some real body horror of like her being like shot up with like multiple like spots where it's like they keep having to find like fresh veins like between her fingernails or between like
Yeah.
her toes or something. Like in the webs of her
It doesn't
feet.
have to be that many, there can be like fairly large syringes if you want, but like I think like 4 or 5 times would be like sufficient enough, like, maybe 6, go by the rules of threes, just to give people the full horror of it all. And, I want the Englishman to come back, because this movie has far too many loose ends. And I think that like in Taiwan after Choi is stabbed. I think there needs to be a scene between him and his British colleague or boss that's like, you fucking idiot.
Boss or underling, we're not sure which.
We're not sure. Because, and then that's the thing, is I need a scene between the two of them to really establish their relationship, because that guy set out all the rules for these mules and he seemed to be running it, and the only one that Choi brought a drink to was Scarlett Johansson, which to me felt like, this is the one I brought in and I feel almost bad that I did, so I'm going to give this to her. Sorry you're dealing with this douchebag. I also think he's a douchebag. Like, he didn't hand a drink to everyone else. He only handed it to her. And to me, that dynamic speaks to, he is the hired underling. He is the body man. He's the guy that you bring in to scare the people, but he's not the boss. The boss doesn't kill people, right? Like, that businessman is the boss, and he hired the men who could do the dirty work. And so I feel like there needs to be like a conversation about either the money that Choi owes to the British guy for these things going astray, and the person he brought in giving the intel, because they need to figure out that Lucy's the one, because who else would fucking know, right? And because he knows, right? She took the information right out of his brain. She said it out loud. So they know who took the information. So the British dude has to be like, you fucked this up. You are the fucking snitch. You need to fucking fix this. And that's why he travels all the way to chase her, not just for revenge. I mean, yes, he wants revenge, but he also like wants to take her down because he's gonna owe a lot of fucking money to that British dude that he fucking hates. Give us a dynamic between the two of them. You only need to add one scene. And you can add that scene without adding too much time when we cut all of the pictures during Morgan Freeman's speech. And that gives us more room for character work, because we need that. We need to know what the relationship is between these villains in order for the villains to work at all. Like, yes, drug dealers and drug smugglers and people who put drugs in people's bodies, very bad. That doesn't need to be explained. But in order for this to be a character-driven like piece, we have to have something about the villains. We have to know more than just he likes to listen to classical music while he gets tattooed. Like, that's not a character trait. That's just a hobby. And so like, give us a little bit to it, because we don't know from the very scene what his relationship is with, I think Richard was her boyfriend's name. It's coming to me now. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe that's just the name I'm giving him, because he doesn't matter.
No, you're right.
Oh, yes. Good for me. I usually forget names. So, so, you know, we don't know what their dynamic is. We know that he says we can't trust him, but he says he's been to this hotel multiple times that week, and that's the reason why he can't go in. He says he can't do it because, you know, there's clearly an issue between him and Choi, or he finds him scary, but we don't know. And they shoot him right away. They come down and they shoot him.
Well, that's actually what I was going to say. I've been thinking about this the whole time too. Is I didn't think about it, but who shoots him? Because they come down, they get her, and they're like, oh, panic, back into the elevator, and they go back up. And we don't know or have been told about who shot the boyfriend, why, and then why they're not going, why we don't see them anymore. Or that, you know, that whoever shot him.
Like, we don't know if it's a setup from Che and his guys being like, oh, that guy? I fucking hate that guy. Because they thought that the briefcase had a bomb in it. So my question is, who does Richard work for that Choi would assume, right, that he's getting a bomb from him, right? He made Lucy open that, which is part of the horror, right? Oh, yeah. He made her open that briefcase. So we need to understand, like, whether it's like exposition between the British guy and Choi talking about Richard and like a rival gang, or maybe they're like, oh, I thought you sent this. No, 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 no. You just have to bring me, now you've brought me the girl, we're good. Or like, like what who sent that? Who sent him the drugs? Richard's just a messenger. He gets $1,000 for it. Who sent the drugs originally? If this is not Choi's thing, why was he in the room with the British man giving out the drugs? Why, like, what is this? Is this a peace offering to this British man? Like, listen, you and I will settle our debts when I give you this girl to travel with your drugs somewhere else. Is that who Richard's working for? I don't know. The movie never answers that. And I think that needs to be answered. And I'm not even going to touch the end because honestly, I just rolled my eyes. And it is what it is. It's fine. She can become a supercomputer. Like, that's not the part that I hated. It's just more the last line. I was just like, what? I've learned nothing, Lucy. I've learned nothing about my time on Earth. I've learned absolutely nothing. You saw nothing beautiful. You did nothing wonderful. You killed a lot of people in the last 48 hours of your life. You solved nothing. You didn't save any of the guys who were with you. What have you really taught us about the time that we need to have? This is some ennui bullshit. This is some nihilistic bullshit because all you did was destroy things. You taught me nothing. And so all of that. And you know what? Maybe what we do have is we have the narrator become Morgan Freeman, and that way he can be telling the story of Lucy. And we still have everything from Lucy's perspective. So when she's doing stuff and the stuff that she's doing, that's her. But the beginning and the beginning and the end is him because he once knew a girl, right? Because he also introduces us to the first Lucy, like, and then he can basically tell us about the last Lucy as well. And so like that bookends it. And, we can talk about time being precious, but don't tell me about what I learned during this time because I learned nothing during this movie. Nothing. Case, your turn.
Oh God, I love it because you've covered a lot of what I would want to address. But the things that I would like to address is the fucking horror of this drug. Like, make this a rare commodity because they're harvesting it off of pregnant women. I think that if we're gonna go big in terms of just like how fucked up things are, let's really let it like sink in, just like how rare and how fucking scary that all is. But then we talked about The Matrix. One movie that we didn't talk about that there are definite vibes of is Akira. Like Tetsuo's like transformation into a psychic being is very much similar to the path of Lucy in this movie. And I just think that, like The Matrix, we just need a little bit more time of low power before we get into high power stuff. That would really, like walking on walls, doing crazy shit would all be great for this whole Inception style second act. But instead, she's just a bit too powerful throughout this whole thing. And then the third act, yeah, sure, can be all over the top crazy psychic powers. Like, I think that's all fine. But man, the science is terrible and it's aggressively bad. Like, it makes you mad the first time they bring it up and it doesn't get better throughout. The fact that they keep on emphasizing it really makes me frustrated. The fact that the drug scheme is so bad makes me so frustrated. Like let's have a more logical like drug smuggling operation going on here. Like, who's the buyer? Like, why are these getting sent to like other countries as opposed to being sold into their local market? Maybe that's a scenario where we can create like if Choi, whose character name is Jang in this movie, like if he's the dragon and then like the British guy is the ultimate villain, maybe it's the British guy who meets them on the other side of the world and is like dealing with that whole situation, or vice versa. It doesn't fucking matter. Like, set up a scenario where the really big bad is the one that they're coming to meet on the far side of the world, as opposed to it's like, well, we're just going to track you down because we want to find our drugs. Like, what's the plan? Like, I've tried writing drug smuggling plans into movie scripts before, and like it does take more work than you think. You actually have to like try to go through all the logistics of like, well, why didn't they do it this way? Why didn't they do it this way? And I don't think this movie did that at all. They just are writing scenes for the sake of being like, no, yeah, it's a fucking drug smuggler. That's why we're gonna like head to France, because like Luc Besson wants to film in France, and shoot stuff there. But yeah, Lucy's power curve is a big part of where this movie breaks, and the science is a big part of where this movie breaks, and those are my big concerns when talking about it. Like, I don't know how I'd clearly fix this movie because it's just one that I'm like kind of mad about. But Sam, I think you hit a lot of the notes, and Renaldy, I think you hit a lot of the notes there, and I'm really happy with a lot of these ideas that we're kind of floating around with. You know, stronger characterization would be great. Like, you know, the roommate, especially the taxi driver, you know, all these supporting characters having like bigger roles. Having Morgan Freeman not dealing with bullshit pseudoscience for the entirety of the movie would be fine. You know, just make the drug being like, oh man, it's unlocking crazy portions of her brain that has never been dreamed before. And you don't need to like fucking spend the whole time being like, we're only at 25% now. Jesus Christ.
Honestly, with less of those countdowns, you could add more character-driven scenes.
Yeah, exactly. And this movie is super tight. It's a tight 90 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
you can't get that mad at a movie for being that tight, except it is just frustratingly bad. Like, it's just rubbing your face in just how bad the science is. And that's a bummer. The fact that Lucy is such a juggernaut throughout this whole movie is also kind of a bummer. It would be fun if we got some action sequences where she is starting to manifest her abilities, but it's not just straight up she just wins every single time. Would make the middle third like be more impactful and give better trailer moments than what we got even.
I think it'd also be great if we just had a couple of like laughs, and like one where she like kind of flicks her hand or does something and realizes that like she's the one who like pins someone on something, like, oh, I can do that. Like, I don't know. I just feel like we need more discovery. Like, she knows too much too soon about her situation and herself.
Yeah.
I think
agree.
Like, she knows by the time she's talking to Morgan Freeman that she's already dying. Like, she knows that she has like just a little bit of time. There's no desperation for her, right? Or at least it doesn't read as desperation. And I think like if you had been through, like if you're a person and you had been through what Lucy had been through earlier that day, like presumably your whole world has just changed. You know, you went from being an exchange student in another country to kidnapped by a criminal organization and set to be a drug mule, given a drug that is now in your bloodstream that has you tripping balls and knowing things that you didn't know before and making you feel crazy and understanding a language you did not know, writing in that language you did not know. I feel like, you know, even if she read through all of his stuff, I don't think she'd be as calm as this movie, the script wanted her to be. I think that there should be more like, hey, I need to come see you because I need to know what your theory is about the rest of my brain and what's going to happen if this drug keeps doing what it seems to be doing. You know,
Right.
and because like you said, Case, she levels up too quickly, and the knowing is part of leveling up too quickly. I think that there should have been a moment, you know, in the airport where maybe someone looks at her funny and she like panics, and maybe she does something and she knocks them down and she's like, oh shit, like that was stronger than I thought it was supposed to be. Because superheroes, when you get powers, like that's not what you want. And so like maybe she like the guy's looking at her really funny, she gets nervous and she looks at him and she does like a fast glance and it sends him flying into a garbage can, and she puts her sunglasses back on and keeps walking while everyone's like, oh my God, are you okay? What happened? Right? Like, because like that would give you the idea that like she's not completely in control of everything. Like she's kind of, because that in itself is a kind of struggle. You can still be like Akira level, but if you don't know how to control like your Dragon Ball powers, yes, let's bring all of the superpowers into this. If you don't know how to control your powers, then you're not just a danger to other people, you're a danger to yourself. And so like a lot of times, like in even fantasy and sci-fi, like when you get super powered, part of what is interesting on the hero's journey, if the hero is not specifically leveling up, then they're learning how to harness the incredible powers that they've been given. And I think Lucy needs that. She needs some harnessing scenes. She needs some like, oh shit, I fucked that up. And she needs like a couple like, oh, finally got the hang of it. Like kind of like, oh, good job, brain. We are now operating at 40%. No, maybe she could even say it. Oh, good. Now at 40%, I can control that. Fine. We can keep his stupid percentages in just without the black cards and just have her say it. She can even tell people, and people can be like, how you doing now? You know, sweat coming down, like, I'm at 50%. I'm at 50%. By the way, there's rice in your beard. Like, I don't know. I just needed a little more hyper focus, ridiculousness coming from her, and a hero's journey of some sort, which could be learning how to level up, learning your powers, or leveling up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I feel like it's there's a maybe a conversation to be had where maybe this is either a 3-part film, you know, where you are able to slowly see, and then there's that final, you know, third film where you're whatever being able to see all of her powers and have a villain that has the capability maybe to fight with her on her level of some sorts, or a TV show. But like I also kind of go back to like again, there's a Limitless came out like 3-4 months prior to it, and it worked. So how can we get this film to do that? And there's just a lot of, I think, development that just was thrown out for the sake of maybe the action part of it. And like you said, Case, you know, Scarlett Johansson was just coming off of, you know, being in a lot of good big blockbuster films. Maybe they're trying to use that power. So this like, you know, pushing for that and being able more so to, it's not really a film that, you know, the philosophical part of it was kind of thrown on the wayside, and they were just trying to enjoy a good fight, or not even a fight, action film, and just they failed on that one as well. So
yeah, it's frustrating because this movie just makes me mad when I watch it, even though there's like good things in it. But yeah, I think we've hit the nail on the head for several of the details of this movie that are frustrating about it. And you know what? We honestly got a better conversation out of it than I expected based on my like frustration going into this one. So Renaldy, thank you for bringing this movie.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, and I loved. I'm trying to figure out how to make this movie better.
No, this was a really fun conversation. So before we get into like where we can find everyone, Sam, what are your thoughts on this movie in terms of your chores scale?
Okay. I want you guys to hear this because this is like so important. This movie is not good for any chores, and I will tell you why. It's not because it doesn't have good scenes, okay? It's fine. There are actually some like great scenes in it. But here's the thing. If you take your eyes off this film, when you look back, you're going to go, what did I miss? This is so confusing. And you're going to rewind. And then you're going to realize that it had nothing to do with you like going to another room to sweep something or folding your laundry. This movie takes leaps and bounds that sometimes you go, wait, why is she made of sand? What is this, the mummy? Why is she disappearing? I don't understand. And then you're going to go, Sam, should I sit down and watch this fully? And I would say, no. So don't watch this because you will end up watching it fully. You will rewind over and over again. You will get no chores done. This is a 1 on the chore scale. Do not watch this movie. You will learn nothing, and it will distract you, and you will feel like you were crazy every time you pop back in. This is not a chores movie.
All right. Well, there you have it. Well, there you have it on that one. Renaldy, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.
Where can people find you and follow you? What have you got going on? Like, where, if people enjoyed this episode, where can they find you?
Oh, well, I guess as of right now, I'm more so doing photography, so they can follow me at Renaldy Smith Photography on Instagram currently. And outside of that, I haven't really been doing a lot of. This is the first in quite some time in terms of being able to really work on doing some kind of discussions or art discussions. So that's really where I'm at right now, or you can follow me my personal account, That Actor Smith, on IG. I post some fun little stories here and there. Currently, I will be becoming a father soon, so that's going to be my life for the next 9 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Woo, paternity. No, but that's awesome. People should check out your Instagram. It's fun seeing what you're taking still lifes of and presenting out there. And yeah, no, like you're a cool guy, and I'm glad that we were able to reconnect after it's been a few years since the last time we really chatted.
Thanks, guys.
So thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. And yeah, definitely a lot more depth in terms of conversation for this movie, Lucy. Yeah, it'd be fun. It would be to take some of the ideas and maybe rewrite it, and then but then I'm like, well, Luc Besson's like, no, that's not the movie, and whatever, but it'd be interesting.
Totally. Now, Sam, where can people find you and follow you?
They can find me here. And also I do lurk on our Discord. So, you might want to go over there to, Certain Point of Views Discord. I may not comment, but I'm definitely reading what you say. And I'm not judging, though. But if you are judging me about anything I said, especially if you're French and very hurt by the Louvaist that I mentioned, you can find KSAT and give all of your complaints to him.
Oh, well, bring all the complaints to me. You can find me on most social media platforms at Case Aiken, except for Instagram, where I'm holding on for dear life to my AIM screen name from high school, which is Quetzalcoatl 5. Quetzalcoatl 5, because I was pretentious in high school and I remain that way. But frankly, the Discord is probably the best way to get in touch. It's a great community. If you go to our website, certainpov.com, you can find a link to the Discord. If you look in the show notes for this episode, you can find a link to the Discord. We are having tons of great conversations about movies, about video games, about tabletop RPGs, about music, about sports.
Great.
Sports.
Awesome.
I'm not participating in those conversations that much, but they are happening on our Discord. So you can check that out. And I should note that if you would like to check out the things that we are working on, you can find us on all kinds of platforms where you get your podcast, or at Certain POV Media on YouTube, where we are doing all of these podcasts there, as well as all kinds of videos that I just happen to want to put up. So go to Certain POV Media on YouTube and check out that. Statistically, you're actually probably watching this on YouTube based on our subscriber counts. So the YouTube is a great place for all of this. And yeah, if you want to support the show, if you enjoyed what we're doing, we have a Patreon going. So the Patreon is at patreon.com/certainpovmedia. And we've got a bunch of people to thank, because in addition to the essays that I write every week at the free tier and the shout out, or rather the sneak peeks that we give for everyone at the paid tiers, for those who joined at the executive producer level, they get shout outs at the end of every podcast. And that includes Micah McCaw, Carter Hallett, Sean Muir, Lee Greger, Memento Young, Logan Crowley, Joe Mastropiero, Casey and Nancy Aiken, Adam Samter, and Keith Lettinen. These are the awesome people who joined at the executive producer level. If you want to be like them, you can join our Patreon and contribute at those levels. And it would be awesome because, it helps keep the lights on. But otherwise, come join at the free tier, because like I said, I'm doing 2 essays a week, one on a nerdy topic and one on a D&D topic, which is a nerdy topic, but of a specific subset. And you can come and check those out. I do 2 essays a week. It's a lot of fun, and it's really great for me just to be able to vent my thoughts about the world. So check that out, and then circle back for the next episode of this show. Sam, what are we talking about next time?
Next time, we'll be talking about Highlander 2: The Quickening. But until then, if you enjoyed this, pass it on.
thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Past podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Another Pass is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Sam Elisea and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Sophia Ricciardi. Our logo and episode art is by Case Aiken. Our intro theme is by Vin Macri, and our outro theme is by Matt Brogan.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.